Following good people on social media who post good material is better than following people who post bad material. But is it the best? That's the question. The argument that you get a lot of the time is, but social media can be used for good. Like, there's good stuff on there, but that's not the point. The point is it the best stuff? Even consuming something good can be a waste of time if it comes at the expense of something better. Hello and welcome to the Innerfire Podcast. We're glad you're with us today. Today we're continuing our conversation on technology, trying to figure out what it means to live out our faith with technology. Our book giveaway is still going on, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about that later. But for now, let's just dive in and see what we can figure out about this subject.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
So last time we talked about the Tower of Babel, we talked about the smartphone, and we're going to move on today and dedicate some time to social media. And I think a good way to get into this conversation is just to tell a little bit about my own experience with social media. My relationship with social media changed in 2020, and I have a journal entry from that time that I think would be good to share, just to let people know what my thinking was around this time and really what affected this. So I'm going to read an abridged version of that.
Okay.
July 15, 2020. Last night marked the end of a week-long fast from entertainment and social media. I proposed the fast to my sister Hannah in hopes of addressing a conviction of hers regarding media consumption and decreased productivity. The conditions of the fast were simple. We were to completely abstain from social media, YouTube, video streaming services, and television. We granted ourselves the consumption of music and podcasts under the condition that we may be doing no other task when we listen to them. As the proposer of the fast, I anticipated positive results. What I got was potentially life-changing insight. During the first few days of the fast, my mind was alarmingly restless. It begged me for stimulation, particularly while I was driving or eating. In the past, I would never be found doing these activities in complete silence. A song, a YouTube video, or a podcast would always be sounding. My mind missed this comfort terribly and made quite a fuss about it. However, I managed to bear this discomfort long enough for the detox to take place. With the option of watching videos and scrolling through social media eliminated, I began devoting more time to more beneficial preoccupations. I began to read significantly more. I completed the 2 books I had been reading and began 2 new books. I set aside time almost every day for the listening of a new music album. Since the beginning of the fast, I have listened to 6 such albums. I devoted more time to my devotional life as well. I began reading and meditating upon only 1 verse of the Bible each day. These times of devotion were so rich and edifying that I remained in them for an average of 2 hours a day, and even then could scarcely be pulled away from them. This steady consumption of rich materials, in stark contrast to the preponderance of sheer nonsense and idiocy characteristic of entertainment and social media, transformed my thought life. My thoughts became clearer and yet more complex, lighter and yet more profound. The sharp decrease in data input allowed me to better absorb and retain that data, which I did consume. With these pleasures denied, what increased in pleasure as a result? Everything else. Not only long, difficult tasks like reading and writing, but mundane tasks also became significantly more pleasurable. Suddenly, I came to look forward to getting out of my bed in anticipation of the joy of everyday life. The quality of sleep and ease of waking increased. I suspect this was a result of the breaking of a habit of mine in which I spend approximately half an hour on my phone, consuming entertainment and social media, to wind down before bed. The removal of useless data input and glaring blue light in my eyes likely affected this change. My mind became clearer than normal, resulting in improved speech, study, and wit. I've treated those around me better, being more sensitive to their needs and more able to meet them. And finally, I'm more aligned across the dimensions of body, mind, and spirit. It's important to note that all of this took place within the span of a week. That week, however, came to a close, and with it, the fast. I confess that I was sad to see it go. Nevertheless, I returned to entertainment and social media at the appointed time, making only the change of placing a limit on my consumption of it. I began scrolling through my feed. And what did I encounter? Vanity, temptation, and foolishness. Why did I ever put myself through this? I asked. Why indeed? What about when I returned to YouTube? Having allotted only 30 minutes for it, I knew I must be judicious with my video choice. What video is so good I will use my allotted time for it? A few moments of thought revealed a frightening truth. There is almost nothing that I usually watch on YouTube that I myself consider worth half an hour of my time. To summarize, my return to entertainment and social media was not a happy one. When I awoke the next morning, I knew immediately something is wrong. I had a tightness in my chest. It was as if someone had his hand around my heart and was squeezing it. I took no pleasure in my morning tasks. I walked into a coffee shop and saw one of my professors. I was in college at the time. She greeted me and asked how I was doing. I absent-mindedly replied, "Hanging in there." A moment later, I thought, hanging in there? You're living in the victory of Jesus Christ, and you dare to characterize your existence this way. Who was it that gave such a reply? Was it me? How then did I despise it so immediately afterwards? My alignment was slipping. I never doubted this unrest in my soul was related to the termination of the fast. It was only when I began to consider pulling the plug entirely that I gained peace on the matter. I sought the counsel of family, and I considered the ramifications of such a decision. I'm in a state of fasting and prayer on the matter as I write this entry. While I still seek the will of the Lord and will not act until I'm confident of it, I have a new phrase echoing inside of me. Social media and entertainment is poisonous to your soul. And my soul is not something that I may allow to be poisoned. 3 days after I wrote that entry, I deleted my social media accounts, Instagram, Facebook, even Snapchat, sparing only my YouTube account. And perhaps after hearing that entry, you can understand why. So, your turn.
Well, hearing what you wrote after that experience, it's pretty amazing. It's stunning, to hear that, to believe that social media and entertainment had that much impact on you. And, I want to explore why you think it had that much impact on you, and I want to address some of the issues that no doubt other people in their minds right now are saying, it doesn't have that effect on me. My chest would not be tight after if I had gotten off and get back on. There's something else going on there. So I think we need to dig into the particulars of that and try to unravel why it made such a difference.
Yeah.
Because it is so much of an impact. I think it just leaves people shaking their heads. And I do want to point out to people that you wrote this well before you ever considered being in this line of work or doing a podcast on this. I mean, this was a few years ago when you were in college. I would also point out that when you made this decision, one of the big things was you're a musician. You were promoting yourself and making connections on social media.
Yeah. And
so you made the decision that doing that way is not worth the ramifications of what I'm having to deal with otherwise. So, because I know there will be arguments of, oh, that's why I'm on social media.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I just want to point that out. But why do you think this was so transformative? And do you think your experience was atypical, or do you think anyone who did this would have a similar experience?
We choose the reality that we live in based on what we direct our attention towards. You see what you look at. You hear what you listen to. And by looking at something, you're choosing to value it. And in that way, your own experience of reality is a manifestation of your value system. When you direct your attention to what's on social media, that's the world that you're choosing to live in. When you direct it away, and entertainment was also a big part of this. That's not what we're talking about today. We are going to talk about it at another point, so I'm just going to hang on social media here. When you take your attention away from that, then you're also changing your own experience of reality. So, how impactful that experience is going to be for you is directly proportional to how much time you spend on social media, because that's how much time you're giving your attention to that thing, and therefore it's that proportion of your reality that consists of. So if you spend 30 minutes on social media a day and you get rid of social media, your experience of reality is going to be very similar. If you spend 3 hours on social media, then you're going to have a very impactful experience doing this. Now, was it more impactful for me because of my personality and because of the things that I'm interested in and the way that I think about things? I think that that's possible, yes. But I'll also say, I'm not on an island here. I'm not the first one to have done this. And the other people that have done it, they have their reasons too. So I wouldn't go so far as to say this is a universal experience, but I would say it's universal enough that it's worth a try, right? There's a good enough chance that you're going to learn something important from an experience like this that you should try it for yourself.
Yeah, I don't think most people understand the impact that it's having on them across really all forms of media and entertainment. And, there are a few cliches that are applicable here. And so I'm just going to say them, you are what you eat.
Yep.
But we're not talking about food. We're talking about things that you put into your mind.
Yes.
It is the reality. The stuff that you take in via social media, via the internet in general, that is what you're going to regurgitate. That is who you become. That's just the facts of the matter. If you're talking about computers, what do we say? Garbage in, garbage out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do you expect to produce the fruit of the Spirit when what you're consuming is not of any spiritual value, and in fact, probably is the opposite, right?
Right.
At the very least, it's not valuable.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just stop right here because I know our listeners are probably saying, well, the social media that I'm on, I find out what's going on in people's life, and they post good stories, and they post spiritual things. I'm not consuming junk. I'm not following evil people.
Yep.
And so what you're saying isn't really applicable to me. You want to address that?
Following good people on social media who post good material is better than following people who post bad material. But is it the best? That's the question. And this is something that I'm wrestling with right now because I love to listen to podcasts. I have certain podcasts that I really like and that I think are really good. Here's the question though. Is it as good as the same amount of time reading a book, right? So, if you listen to this podcast very much, you're probably already aware that I am a fan of Jordan Peterson. He has a podcast. I think it's a really good podcast. He also has 3 books. Okay, the question is, would I be better off having read those 3 books, which are a condensed, edited, purified version of his best thoughts? Or is it listening to a podcast that is him thinking in real time, usually counter to somebody else? The answer most likely is the book, right? So what that means is that in a sense, even consuming something good can be a waste of time if it comes at the expense of something better, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to think, and see, this is really key because the argument that you get a lot of the time is, but social media can be used for good. Like there's good stuff on there, but that's not the point. The point is it the best stuff, right?
Well, I think, but you hit on a thing there is you said if you think about what you're consuming, well, I think this is where we start to come off the rails. Thinking is hard work.
Yeah.
Planning is difficult work. We don't really want to do that. We want to live in the moment. And, thinking about what I'm doing, having a strategy for life is not something most people want to do. I mean, let's just face the facts.
Sure.
Right? So what we're trying to say here, I believe, is that if you're going to live life with purpose, which if you're a Christian, you should be on mission, right? We are Christ's ambassadors. We're not just put here for no reason. We have a purpose and a reason for being here. And so the question is, am I fulfilling my purpose? Do I know what my purpose is? To fulfill a purpose, you've got to think about it. You've got to be intentional. And so, I'm a middle of the road guy. I'm not a hard one way or hard the other way. I'm not going to sit here and tell everybody you need to get off of social media. But what I am going to say is you have to think about what you're doing. If you're going to fulfill your purpose in this life, what is your purpose? Well, I just said it, you're to live for Christ, but let me boil it down for you. People have kids and grandkids that they have been made responsible for. Mm-hmm. We have been put here on earth to guide them, to help them, to instruct them, to help our community. We have to do these things with purpose. It's why our country is falling apart because we're all consumed with social media rather than living out the purpose that we're put here for. Mm-hmm. I've said it before on here, and I'll say it again. Can we save the country? Can one person save the country? Yes. We think, well, me being on Facebook, me mindlessly scrolling Facebook or Instagram or Twitter and listening to the ranting on there, if I quit doing that, I'm not going to change the world. Well, you might. You might, because you might pick up the phone and call somebody. You might walk across the yard and visit with your neighbor. Mm-hmm. You might go help somebody that's in need. You might look your kids in the eye and share something important with them that lasts for a long time. These are the things that we're missing. And this is why our society is falling apart. Mm-hmm. And, so people say, people might say, well, that's more of a political slant. Well, no, it's a Christian slant in that we're supposed to be the light of the world.
Yes.
If we're mindlessly browsing social media, we're not being a light. And let me just go ahead and say this. You posting something on social media Does it help people? Yeah, there's some value to that. I mean, we've gotten feedback, positive feedback ourselves. Jonna has gotten positive feedback. But there's much more and more value and more depth to be had by engaging directly with somebody in person, or at the very least in a conversation.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to get to see. We're not trying to say don't get on social media just because, you don't need to be on social media. There's a higher purpose here, but it requires some thinking and intentionality to fulfill that purpose.
I want to hang on something you said. People say, I use my social media to honor Christ, to share truth and encouragement. Okay, that's a good use of social media, and I want to get into that later. But what you said there about people feeling the need to make their voice heard. Okay, this is one criticism that I'll level against social media. It gives us an inflated sense of our own self-importance. Now, everyone is a brand. Mm-hmm. And your social media is your brand. And you are projecting something to the world, and it has this sort of feeling of celebrity to it. It's like, well, they need, we're recording this the morning after the Republican debate, the first one, the one in Milwaukee. And some people are going to say that and say, okay, my friends need to know what I think about this. Mm-hmm. They need to hear my thoughts. Okay.
Your friends don't care about your thoughts.
Well, here's what they say. You don't know what you got till it's gone. What it means is the impact of something is really felt when it's no longer there. Okay. Here's what I did when I deleted social media. I didn't tell anyone except my family. I didn't tell any of my friends. And I said, let's see who notices. It was months before one friend noticed. My contribution to the noise of social media, the absence of it was felt by no one. Okay? I think a lot of people would probably have the same experience. You're not as, I don't want to say you're not as important.
Well, let me interrupt here and jump in.
Yeah.
Because I hopefully I'm not cutting you off on where you're wanting to get to, but I think what you're saying is we as people have an innate need to be valued, to be loved, to have a purpose, just like what I was saying a minute ago, and we get an artificial opinion of ourselves of being important when we post something on social media. We think, I'm posting this, and 100 people are reading it, and they really care about it. Therefore, I am important, and my opinions are so important. Yeah. But that is a totally false narrative because of exactly what you just said. You could quit posting that, and nobody would notice. Nobody would realize that you're not on social media anymore, which speaks to the fact of how much they actually value that.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I would say is, this is, again, back to why society is falling apart. We're finding our value in posting something on social media rather than walking across our lawn and giving our neighbor a helping hand. Going down to the community center and feeding the hungry, or doing something that actually impacts somebody's life. Posting something on social media does not, except in an infinitesimally small way, impact somebody's life. Going down and giving somebody a meal, going down and volunteering at a pregnancy center, those things have real purpose that impact real people in the real world.
Yep.
And feed your need for purpose. That's how we need to be purposeful, not by this artificial feeling of posting something on social media and feeling important because we did.
Okay. So I'll tell you this too. This also had to do with me getting off social media. It was around the time of George Floyd's death. Okay. A lot of buzz on social media about that. And if you remember, there was this thing of posting this like black square. People did it on Instagram. And it's like, I am part of the alliance, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an activist. I'm doing something. Yeah, I don't think so. But let me use a little bit less politically charged example. This really bothered me. And look, I don't know that much about this movement, okay? But there are people who were getting involved on social media with this End It movement, and it had to do with human trafficking, sex trafficking. And what they would do is they would put a red X on their hands or something like that, and they'd post that, okay? I think probably most of them, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that. I don't know. Probably most of them didn't actually do anything to help women who are being trafficked. Okay. That offends me because to me, it is an insult to those women who are suffering to take a Sharpie and put an X on your hand and put that on social media and say that you've done something to help them. That's not the case. And it's virtue signaling, you know, it's posturing, it's a facade, and, you know, Lord help us, it's an excuse not to do something, right? It's like, well, no, I did this. No, you didn't do anything. And if you were to get off of social media, you might open up a little bit of time to see the world around you and then to act.
It's a false sense of importance. And we build up this facade. We talked about it on the last podcast with this alternate universe that we live in. We like to go into this alternate universe because in the alternate universe, we are important people. Our voice matters. You know, people listen to what we say. That's what we think. But then we go out into reality and we realize we're just an average guy. You know, nobody really cares what I say. If I'm at the water cooler talking to a person, their opinion is just as strong as mine in the opposite direction. But we can, you know, we're just not as important in real life as we think we are on social media.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is get out of the alternative universe and get back into reality and use our gifts and our talents to help real people who have real struggles in real life. You know, that's what we're advocating for here. And I hope people get that and will begin to evaluate their social media use in those terms and do a hard self-evaluation. You know, is what we're saying, does it fit to you? I mean, you know, people need to listen and say, you know, we have a trouble evaluating ourselves. It's always somebody else that this is pertinent to. Right? I mean, that's the problem in church, right? You know, we always say, man, that's a great sermon the pastor just preached. I wish so-and-so had been here to hear it, you know, rather than applying it to ourselves. So I hope people will. And, you know, for me personally, you know, we've these podcasts, we've said this before, but they're impactful to us in our preparation, our study, our discussion of them. They're impactful to us whether or not anybody else gets anything out of it or not. You know, I have to evaluate my own social media use. Maybe we'll talk about this in a minute about why I am still on social media. But, you know, I've done a self-evaluation, and I have to weigh the cost of, is what I'm getting out of it, or is the value I'm adding to somebody else's life worth me being on there? Yep. And that's what we really got to look at. Of course, I think too, we have to address why we as a ministry are on social media.
Sure.
And we'll speak to that in a minute too. But anyway, I don't know what else we want to cover relative to that, but that's some good stuff, I think.
I want to tell another story. I'm going to borrow this story from my brother Jacob. He also got off social media around the same time I did. We did this independent of each other, and it was also related to the George Floyd incident. He was on social media. He was watching what was going on. he was driving down the road and he was thinking, what is the world coming to? We're at each other's throats. We're burning our cities down. There's so much division. There's so much hatred, strife. This is bad. We're in trouble. And then as he was driving, he stopped at a gas station and he went inside. And this experience was kind of a wake-up call for him going into this gas station. Because he went in there and everyone was calm. Everyone was going about their daily lives, laughing, talking, eating. People of all different colors and different occupations. And he said, wait a second, I thought the world was burning down. Here we have white, black, and brown living in harmony in this gas station right after George Floyd just died. There is an incongruence between the social media world and the real world. He recognized that there is not a true overlay of the social media representation of reality onto reality. And he decided which world he wanted to live in. Now, we dealt with the reality thing last time, and I don't want to get into that too much. But notice in that it's also the case that probably a lot of what was happening in reality around that time was ginned up on social media first. So again, what's happening is we're taking internet realities and trying to represent them in the real world rather than the other way around, representing real world realities on the internet. And most of that happens on social media. So just beware that, as to harken back to what I said earlier, the world you're choosing to live in may not resemble the real world as much as you think it does if you're living through social media.
Well, I believe there are two key things here to what you just said. The actions that we see happening, that we saw happen then and that we see happening today, like the mass burglaries in California that happen where 30 or 40 people get together, the smash and grab things that we see. A lot of that is enabled by social media. It's part of that false narrative that people drum up. So social media fuels it on the front end, and it also fuels it on the back end because then people can post about it, that they were there, that they were maybe even involved. They can brag about it. They can watch themselves on the 6 o'clock news. So you got the 24/7 news cycle that blows all this stuff up. That you talk about making a mountain out of a molehill. The evening news is the 24/7 news cycle are kings at that.
Yeah.
And so we're fueling it from both ends, and where it meets reality is that when social media turns into negative actions in our community. And so, I think there's a couple of things that we might want to address. Is social media is a reality in our world. If I get off of social media, is that really going to have an impact? Or how do I make it an impact by getting off of social media? Is it just a fact of life that we now have to deal with? And so is it better to deal with it inside of it or outside of it? You know what I'm saying?
Okay. I'm glad you said that, because this is a good opportunity to come at things from a little bit of a different angle. Now, I am not what they call a Luddite. And you might assume that I am from having listened to these last two podcasts.
And you might want to give a definition of
a
that.
Luddite basically being someone who rejects new technologies, who just says, no, we were better off in the Stone Age. Okay. Which you can make a case for that, but that's not me, okay? I think that it's good to use new technologies. And I had to really wrestle with this when I was considering getting rid of my smartphone. Because here's what I know. I know that if I don't use a smartphone and I get away from that world, then I am not going to be fluent in that interface. and I'm going to fall behind, and my involvement, my participation in society, so to speak, is going to be less if that's how society is participating with itself. Same thing with AI. Some people are like, AI bad. No, I don't think that at all. So the question is not, is it good to use technologies? I like technology. I think that technology is good. You just have to weigh the costs and the benefits. What I eventually realized is that the benefit derived from staying on top of the new technologies, which, by the way, think about your grandparents, or if you're a senior citizen listening to this. They're not fluent in the new technologies, okay? They get taken advantage of at alarming rates by people who are fluent in the technologies via scams and whatnot. These things have real costs beyond just your participation, right? In the society. Is it worth that, right? My own evaluation left me with the feeling that I was getting more benefit not being on it than the benefit I would get from being on it, the smartphone, social media, whatever else. So I would say in general, you should try to learn the new technologies. You should try to derive the benefits that they offer, but you have to be awake while you're doing that. And that's the other thing. You have to understand these technologies. We made that point last time. You have to use them to understand them, right? Mm-hmm. And if they can be used for good, you're not going to know that unless you try to use them.
Well, I think understanding the technology and being on social media can be independently accomplished. Right? I mean, they're not intertwined, as in you have to be on social media to understand technology. I think the question still comes back to, if I get off social media, and I think this is where people struggle. If I get off of social media, it's not going to impact what's happening in the world, right? And this, what I want to tell people is, it can impact what's happening in your world, which means the people that are closest to you and that are around you. And then that has a ripple effect out to the other people that extend beyond your network. It has to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. And, if you just look at how much time, if people will look at how much time they're spending on these platforms, and then just do something positive with a real person in that same time. You made a case, I think it was on one of our podcasts way back, maybe when you were in college. If you would take that time and pick up the phone and actually call somebody, connect with somebody every single day, I guarantee you are on social media enough during the day that you could do that and not impact anything else that you're doing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A lot of people that are on it are on it. They could call a lot of people. What I'm saying? They could connect with a lot of people in a real way. So we would encourage people to do that. One thing that we might want to dig into just a little bit is the generational difference in how social media is used. Mm-hmm. Because I think there's a big generational gap between how we're using social media versus how your generation is using social media. Do you agree that there is a disconnect there, or do you see them the same?
I think that as I said earlier, my generation uses social media as their branding platform. And I think that your generation is not as attuned to that. One thing I noticed about, and look, when I was on Instagram, I was very mindful of this. I liked being on Instagram. I had fun with it. And I had an idea about what my page was that I didn't want to violate. Right. Innerfire, we have an idea about who we are, and we want to keep our brand consistent, right? Mm-hmm. If we have, here's our brand, here's our target audience, let's operate within those confines. I did the same thing with my Instagram, and some people do it a lot more. Some people, they have a consistent color palette across all of their photos.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you went to the Coca-Cola Instagram page. I'm not kidding. I think that it's like persona taken to some strange extreme.
Well, I think the difference is, I think it might be valuable for people to understand this. Your generation grew up with smartphones. You grew up with the internet. It has a different impact on you than it does on us. I didn't grow up with smartphones or the internet. I didn't have an internet connection until I was married and almost had kids. And so I think we view social media as more of a reach out and touch you. Oh, I'm finding out what the grandkids are doing. Yep. I'm keeping up with my old high school friends. That kind of a thing. And we see it as so benign. And I think, not to be, I don't want to be against the older generation, but I think the older you get, the more likely it is that you read more into or accept more of what's being presented as real. The younger you are, I don't know. Does your generation think everything that's on there is real? I mean, all this branding that's being put forward, do they say, oh, that's who Andrew really is because that's what's on his Instagram page? I'm very skeptical of that myself. I think maybe there's a generation yet before me that accepts that a little bit more and doesn't really drill into what's happening. I don't want to paint with a broad brush here, and I'm probably doing that. But what do you think about that?
I think that my generation is extremely skeptical. And I think that they know that what they're experiencing on social media is a facade. But to a degree, they're complicit in that. They're saying, okay, this is the social game, right? Mm-hmm. It's not that, oh, we're all posturing and that's bad. It's, oh, we're all posturing and this is what it means to be a person in society. Mm-hmm. But think about how damaging that is to your psychology and to your sociology if everyone around you is lying all the time, right?
And we don't have that to that extent. My generation, I think, we're not doing as much posturing as a whole. Now, yeah. I think there are certain people in my generation that are. I think my generation, and quite honestly, if you look at like Facebook, why have all the young people fled Facebook, right? Because it's more of what I'm talking about. Oh, here's what the grandkids are doing. Here, Instagram, which is obviously pictures, there's a lot more impact with a picture. Even on Facebook, if we post a picture, we get multiple times over more engagement than if we just put words on a page. Yeah. So Instagram, there's always a picture there, right? And so I think that's a little bit of a younger generation, and the younger generation keeps fleeing the older generation, which tells you there is a generational disconnect in how these things are used. But I want to come back to how our generation is using it, because I do think that we see it as benign. We see it as connecting with old friends. We see it as keeping up with relatives that we would have a difficult time keeping up with otherwise, et cetera, et cetera. I want us to dig into what the value of that is, and is there a better way to do it? Mm-hmm.
Well, if I could just say, before we get into that, one difference that could be, you mentioned, it's where we go to keep up with what's going on out there. Okay, so it's documenting what happened in the real world. Okay, my fear for my generation is that to the degree that they go and do real things, the real things that they do are a commercial for their brand. So I'm doing the thing so that I can post about it, not I'm doing the thing for its own value, and then I'll post about it so other people can see what I'm up to. So that's obviously a lot different. Now, as for the whole issue of just keeping up, first of all, I don't accept that you keep up with people that way. Now you might find out, okay, they got engaged, they got married, they had a kid, they moved, they got a new job. Okay. Fair enough. It's good for that. But it's not an accurate representation of how they're really doing, and it's no medium for a relationship.
Well, maybe I could say it this way. What it really is a new form of gossip. I mean, if you think about the back in the party line days of telephones, where you could have a 3 or 4 way conversation if everybody picked up the phone and got on there. There's a lot of jokes about the gossip that happened there and keeping up with what's going on and listening in on people's conversations. We have an innate desire for information and for knowing things that we don't know. Mm-hmm. So if we learn that, hey, my third cousin twice removed got married, and maybe it's a juicy piece of information like, I believe she's already pregnant and they got married. I mean, that really just puts it over the top. Yeah. Because we have this sense of, I learned something new. Mm-hmm. But what is the value of that? All we're doing is feeding something in us that doesn't need to be fed, or we need to be feeding it something of real value rather than useless information. Mm-hmm. It's just a hard question. Does it really matter that I know that my third cousin twice removed got married? I haven't talked to them in 15 years. I couldn't tell you anything about their personality or who they are as a person other than what they present to me, maybe on social media if their thing happens to pop up in my feed. So what is the real value in that? Are we overvaluing the information of keeping up with people on social media?
Well, what I'll say is, you get off social media and you'll find out how valuable it is. If it's really valuable, the people will find out, right? If it's valuable to them, if it's valuable to you, you'll find out, right? So that's what I found. I keep up with my friends still. I had a great call with a friend yesterday in the car, and I called him and I said, "What's new with you?" And what he did was he gave me the genuine condensed version of whatever he might have put on social media for the last however long it's been since I called him last, right? Because I wanted to know, So it's like getting off social media is not the death of those things. But I think we need to also recognize, and this is something we can say about technology in general, is that sometimes that value can be subverted by the technology itself. We made this point about email last time. Let me give you the example of cars, right? People said, okay, we have cars now. We can go way longer distances than before and so much faster. So everyone get a car so you can go and see all of your people. And it's not a 3-day walk anymore. Okay, great. So what happened as a result of the car? We moved away from each other, right? Mm-hmm. A society expanded outward. People's houses got farther away. Families got farther away from each other because we can always just drive over there and see them. Mm-hmm. And so the technology of the car affected distance where it would have purported to affect closeness, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Social media, what it allows you to do is it allows you to not pick up the phone and call that family member and ask them what's new with them because you found it out on social media. And that is, there's something lost there.
Well, what I would say is if your third cousin twice removed gets married and they don't send you a wedding invitation, you might not be as important to them as you think, and the knowledge of that event might not be as important or as needful as you think. Just knowing something does not alter your life or add value to your life or to the person sharing the information. I think there's a lot of pride that happens on social media. We post things because we're prideful. We want people to see the new thing or the accomplishment or what this person did or that person did. That's something we haven't touched on, but well, I guess we've touched on it from a branding standpoint, but in my generation, why are we posting these things? Why do we want 1,000 people to know that I did this thing? I mean, isn't there an element of pride? The Bible speaks a lot about pride. And I don't know if we've got any of those verses handy, but, pride goes before destruction. Yeah. Pride is spoken against. It is the thing that leads us to sin. And I think we haven't made this point, but when do we sin? We are sin when we are drawn away of our own lust and enticed. What do we think social media is doing? It's drawing us into something based upon our lust for information, our lust for being the popular brand, the lust of being liked by people. All those things are what's happening to us when we're on social media. The end of that is sin. I'm not saying that getting on social media is sin, but I'm saying you're feeding the lust for a certain element in you that very likely will lead to sin.
Yes. I will say this. There has been nothing in my life that has freed me from more temptation than getting off social media. I mean, we believe in accountability. Mm-hmm. It pales in comparison to the defense against temptation that getting off of social media offered me. Temptation to all kinds of things. Temptation to, of course, waste time, but, beyond that, temptation to lust after the things that are in front of you. And I don't mean that just in the sexual sense, although in the sexual sense, definitely. Mm-hmm. I think that Twitter is the biggest trafficker of pornography in the world, but we can get into that later. But also, things to buy, right? Okay, let me just say this. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but it's free to use social media. People say, "Oh, what a great product! Mm-hmm. It's free. Mm-hmm. I can get on there and it adds so much value to my life." Okay. Here's the thing. How do they make money? If to the degree that you are on social media, you are the product and you are being sold to advertisers. Mm-hmm. Advertisers are the customer base for social media giants. The product is you. Mm-hmm. So here's what that means. Social media structures itself in such a way as to hijack your psychology, to keep you on it as long as possible, because the longer you're on it, the more ad views you do, and the more money the advertisers give to the social media platforms. Okay?
Well, the other part of that is, too, the more you're on social media, the more information they have about you. Every single item that you post or comment on social media builds a profile of who you are, of the things that you care about and that are important to you.
Yeah.
In case you don't realize it, where you're going is being tracked by social media. They know if you go to church. They know if you go to the mall. They know if you go to the gas station and which gas station and which brand you like. They know if you go look at new boats. They know. They probably hear you talking about it, and they know it just because you're talking about it.
Oh, sure.
And so what happens? I don't think a lot of people, especially in my generation, understand this. But when advertisers, they don't just say, well, I want to post an ad on Facebook. No, what they say is, I want to post an ad on Facebook for people who comment about their grandkids, who go to church at least twice a week, who drive this kind of car and have these kind of spending habits. I mean, it is that focused in because all that information makes their ad that much more targeted.
Yes. Which
makes it that much more valuable to the people who are selling it, because they say, hey, I can give you this exact profile
Yeah.
But you're going to have to pay for it. And
Yep.
so that's what's happening behind the scenes with social media. So if you don't want to be profiled, get off the internet, because definitely you are being stalked.
Yeah.
You are being stalked every single second of the day.
Yeah. And, I've even heard people more in my generation being like, I love my targeted ads. They show me exactly what I want to see.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great if you're a raging materialist.
Yeah.
But those advertisements are designed to make you discontent without the product, right? That's the core of advertisement, right?
Absolutely. You must have it.
In other words, there is a war between your God-given impetus to contentment and the advertiser, right? So to the degree that you are being targeted for ads, your contentment is at stake, right? It is being actively resisted by a secular force.
Yeah, and this we mentioned this last time, but it's a fork in the road from a spiritual standpoint. Are you struggling with peace? Are you anxious? Are you depressed? Are you just having struggles mentally in whatever way? What is social media doing to contribute to that? I almost guarantee you there is a contributing factor there. There's a fork in the road. If you want to choose peace, then go God's way. If you want to choose anxiety, then go the world's way. And that's not to say that Christians don't have anxiety or depression or whatever. They do, but we do have to give the internet and social media its due on its contributing to those mental health issues. I mean, obviously in your generation, we've got a mental health crisis. As you alluded to earlier, the political debate was last night, and that was an issue that was brought up. It's a rampant issue. Can we not see that social media is a huge contributor to this?
Yes. Well, books have been written about this.
Yes.
iGen is what they call us.
Yeah.
Or that's what Gene Twangy calls us. If you look at mental health around the time that social media became ubiquitous, there's a cliff
Yeah.
for my generation.
Yeah.
Around the time that we all got iPhones and all started using social media, our mental health went into the tank. And I don't want to talk about this too long. It's important, yes, but I want to hang on the spiritual issues, right?
Yes.
A lot of this has to do with comparison, right? And this is particularly bad for girls.
Mm-hmm.
Comparison in and of itself has its utility. It's a gauge for where you're at, right? But it can quickly become a monster, especially when the comparison is not true to reality. Because as we've already said, you are getting the cleaned up, brand specific version of whatever it is that you're looking at. Oh, she's so much prettier than me. Oh, he's so much richer than me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then so that appeals to your pride, and it makes you anxious, makes you depressed, really for no reason.
So, totally agree with what you're saying. What I want to do is give people some actionable items. I mean, we've been kind of ranting against social media, if you will. I think it's very justified and valid. But what do people need to do? I'm going to suggest two things.
Okay.
First, I'm going to say take a social media fast for a period of time, at least a week, if not 30 days. Get off of it completely and then evaluate. Has my life changed for the better or for the worse? Mm-hmm. Am I feeling better mentally? Am I more at peace? Use that time to make real connections in the real world with real people, or to educate yourself on a topic. Or
to just do something fun.
Yeah. I think that's my first suggestion. I think it will be impactful. The second suggestion is what I have done with social media, and that is give myself time limits. So on my phone, the two social media platforms that I spend any amount of time on would be Instagram and Facebook. And what I have done is set a 5-minute limit for both of those. Mm-hmm. So I've got 5 minutes to get on there, see what's happening, and get off. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I think if people will set some limits like that for themselves, it will make a big difference. 5 minutes probably seems exceedingly short. And I can tell you it does go by really fast if you're on a platform. You know, Facebook, I'd get off of Facebook today. Really, the only thing that's keeping me on there is our ministry. Yeah. We have a page on there, and I can get on there and comment and share and do things like that to help promote what we're doing, which, by the way, is not sensational or informational of the type that we've been talking. It's really, we really do it as a means of advertising what we're doing to let people know that information is available. Mm-hmm. At least that's our goal of using social media. Quite honestly, with Instagram, I get on there to have some laughs. I'm a big Babylon Bee guy. I like this. They post a lot of stuff every day. They always give me a good chuckle. I keep up with what's happening with TWRA. I'm a big outdoorsman, and I see what's going on with them. And so there are some things like that, but I limit it. And my phone will let me override it. Obviously, I can go on there, but it's a reminder to me, hey, you've been on 5 minutes, you probably ought to move on. Yep. And the vast majority of the time, I do. Mm-hmm. On rare occasion, I will override it. But I think those are just two simple things that people can do that are actionable. You can do them today and just see how it impacts you. You know, going back to what you read at the start, you woke up after you got back on social media with tightness in your chest due to the stress and anxiety that had been induced by that. Yeah. I would be interested to know if people have the same impact. And I think, you know, maybe we could incentivize people to do this. I know we've got the book giveaway that we're going to talk about here at some point in time. Maybe we could come up with some way to incentivize people to do this, or maybe just comment, you know, when you reach out to us about getting your name in the hat for the books, tell us if you've done a social media fast and what the impact has been. Yeah. We would love to just connect with people in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and let me just say as a clarifying matter, you know, the tightness in my chest, was that due to the actual psychological, physical effect of getting back on social media and entertainment? Maybe. I think it also might have just been the conviction of my heart at the time about getting off of it. Now, the tack that I'm going to take on this, obviously as one who doesn't use social media, the question, how do you use it for good, right? I'm going to talk about how Innerfire uses it. Okay, I run Innerfire social media accounts. And look, hey, we're on there, right? It's not all bad. And obviously we wouldn't be unless we thought it could be used for good. We don't put anything out unless it is, we believe, true and right and helpful, right? And that's a lot of what we do here, right? Also our articles. And we are careful as we dispense that stuff not to over-sensationalize it and not to be clickbaity, right? And if you want to know more about that, you can read the article that I wrote a while back about why this ministry may never be successful. I talk a little bit about our approach that we take to this. Now, we get a lot of hate comments on our stuff. Some of the stuff we talk about is controversial, right? Mm-hmm. Here's the approach that we take to that. You can tell if someone is A, just being mean, or B, has a genuine question about what you're saying, okay? If I determine that whoever is making this critical comment is doing so in a genuine effort to understand better, I will reply to their comment. People who are just trying to be mean, I ignore them, right? I think it's Proverbs says, it's the glory of man to overlook an offense, right? And it's always safer to hold your tongue than to get in a dispute and answer a fool according to his folly, right? Mm-hmm. So we are intentional about not doing that on social media. I've asked many people this, especially around the time I was trying to get off social media. I said, has your mind ever been changed by a debate that you had or saw on social media? Never once have I found a person who said, yeah, my mind was changed. Okay, it doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Don't waste your time. You're just making a fool of yourself with that kind of babbly, spiteful debate that happens.
Yeah. Well, the reasons we do it are some of the reasons we've already covered. We want to appear to have a firm grasp of the issues and a good slant on the issues, and we want to be witty and look good, but we're not really accomplishing anything of substance or value by doing so.
Yeah. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. That's
Amen.
what Proverbs says.
Amen.
As you're on social media, guard your heart. There are people who are out for it. And I'll say one more thing, and I know we've got to move on. I try to do this, right? When I'm on YouTube quite a bit. Innerfire is obviously on YouTube. There are ads on YouTube too, okay? I see ads for stuff that would try to tempt me and draw me into a form of sin, okay? I click stop seeing this ad, right? And if they ask, I'll tell them why. You cannot convince me that they do not show more ads like that when you do that. I have noticed that the ads that I say, stop showing me this, they show them to me at least the same amount or more. Okay, what does that mean? That they have, this is total speculation, mm-hmm. Okay? This is just a theory by Andrew. They have realized, probably, that this is something that he feels, we'll say, threatened by.
Mm-hmm.
And I do, because it's temptation, right? So they say, okay, maybe this is a danger zone for him.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if we can exploit that. And if you know anything about advertisers, you'd have no difficulty believing that they would take that line.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think just to try to bring things back spiritually, how do we handle temptation? And I know we want to move on, but there are a few more things that I think we just need to say it. I mean, we maybe spend the whole podcast on social media rather than technology as a whole, but it's a huge issue. How do we deal with temptation? Well, the best way to deal with it is to flee it. To flee temptation is what the Bible tells us. And so how do we do that? We don't get on social media. That is fleeing the things that we're tempted by. And so, and here's the other thing I would say too, relative to the people that just say, well, I just get on to keep up with the grandkids. Well, what are you exposing yourself to keep up with the grandkids? What if you just called the grandkids or the parents and checked in with them that way, mm-hmm. right? I mean, you would not have to expose yourself to the lure of everything else while you are keeping up with the grandkids. Mm-hmm. There's trade-offs for these things. I just want people to realize this and think about this rather than just blindly doing it because everybody else is doing it. You can be different. You don't have to be like everyone else.
You can be peculiar.
You can, exactly. We should be, right? So yes, do that. And just really, really, people, think about what you're doing. This caused me to think more about what I'm doing and to be more intentional about what I'm doing. So that's the point we're trying to get across. Okay, great. So on the subject of temptation, pornography. Before we get into pornography, let's talk about the book giveaway real quick.
Right. So if you watched the last episode, you're aware of this. The Abolition of Man, we are doing a giveaway. We have 3 of them, and we are encouraging you guys to reach out to us at the email address contact@innerfire.com, giving us some feedback on the podcast, telling us who you are, how you heard about us, really anything, what you thought about this podcast. That would be great. We'd love to know it. 3 of the people who do so will be sent this book. It's a fantastic book with great insights about our use of technology and how it relates to God's design and our faith. So please reach out at contact@innerfire.com. The window for that will close 2 weeks following the release of this podcast. So that would be the release of the next podcast. So before the next podcast comes out, reach out to us and you may be selected to receive this great book.
It is a great book. It's a quick read. It's very insightful and eye-opening. I would encourage anyone who has not read it to read it, and you can do it for free simply by sending us your stuff and being drawn. Now,
internet pornography.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When it comes to temptation, this one just about takes the cake.
Yes.
Why? It's a drug. Okay, but it's not like other drugs. Okay? First of all, it's free. Second of all, it's legal.
Mm-hmm.
Third, it's never more than 3 seconds away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on. That is a perfect storm.
Mm-hmm.
You
well,
know,
and the other big thing I think too is that there is an illusion that you can do it in secret with no impact to anyone else.
Yep.
It's a zero risk drug. You know, if you get high on cocaine and go down to the local store, somebody might notice you're acting a little weird. Pornography doesn't have that obvious effect. You know, you can do it in your closet, so to speak, when you're by yourself on your phone. I mean, the phone obviously is a huge enabler for this. I think if people thought they were going to be found out, they wouldn't do it. But they don't think they're going to be found out. But there are ripple effects that become evident, and then oftentimes people are found out, and the ramifications are huge.
Yep.
Not to mention, the Bible says, be sure of this, your sin will find you out.
the Lord will reveal it.
Yeah, well,
in this life or the next.
This life or the next. If I'm viewing internet pornography, you may never know it.
Mm-hmm.
God knows it, and it disrupts my relationship with Him. Not to mention what it does to other people in my life. So I think that's a big contributing factor. Is people think they're doing it in secret, whether it's a computer or on their phone.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Man, I read a lot of Proverbs last night, and it talks about the adulteress and how she woos you and how she pulls you in, the forbidden woman, and you go into her and you end up in the pit. You end up among the dead, right? It's absolutely true. And how do you resist that? You heed the words of wisdom. The words, the given writings, the words of your father and your mother, right? Mm-hmm. You love wisdom, you chase wisdom, and you will be able to escape the wiles of the forbidden woman. You know, people will hear everything we just said and like, yeah, it's too much. I can't stand it. Everyone does it. Just get off my back. Mm-hmm. No, do not accept. By the power of the Spirit and by the truth of God's word, you do not have to be subject to this. And you can't do it alone. You need someone's help, right? And if there's no one around you who you can talk about this with, reach out to us. Mm-hmm. I would be overjoyed to help anyone get over this horrible thing, right? This is a great example of how technology puts sin in new packages for us, right? Mm-hmm. But look, if you look at a woman with lustful intent in your heart, you've committed adultery with her. That's what Jesus said, okay? That deals with the issue of pornography in its entirety. And that was before pornography was ever thought of, right? I mean, at least internet pornography, right? Mm-hmm. The answer is still in the Word. Jesus knew that you would face this. And He says He would not allow you to be tempted beyond what you could bear, but He would provide a way of escape. Don't give in, and don't accept. Don't go down into the pit. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is you're making a point. I think we got two groups of people here. I would say we got a group of people who would say, obviously internet pornography is wrong. I don't want to do it. Maybe I've been tempted by it. Maybe I've viewed it. And then you got some people who have just given up and basically said, hey, it's just what I do. I mean, it's like watching a football game. I go watch a little bit of pornography or view some pictures or whatever, and it's just entertainment. And, as you said just a minute ago, get off my back about it. I mean, I cannot, for that group of people, the damage that you are doing to yourself and your relationships is severe and consequential, and you can overcome it. You can rise out of that pit that you're in. Do not accept it. And I think in their heart of hearts, they know this is not something, but I think they've just been so overcome with it that they just give up. And let's face the facts. Men especially, but women can be included in this too, but men especially are tempted by sexualized images. It's just the bottom line of who we are. Let's admit it. And so, we talked about getting off of social media earlier. If you're tempted and you haven't fallen into that pit, but you're right on the precipice of it because you get on Twitter and you see stuff that draws you in, you want to click on it. I mean, let's just admit the facts that when those images come, we pause and we do think, maybe some people to more degrees than others. Maybe you don't need to be on Twitter. Maybe you need to get off Twitter for this sole reason. Instagram, it's the same thing. It's there without you searching for it. They're going to put it in front of you.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I can speak as a user of Instagram. Don't ever do a search for anything if you don't want to be tempted by these things, because they're going to put it in your feed. And so if we're going to flee temptation, maybe this is reason enough to get rid of it just for this, just to flee internet pornography alone. And certainly if you're using that as a means to indulge, and you're in that second group that's basically just accepted it, maybe the first step is making it harder and getting off. And then the second step, if you haven't done it, is you need to admit it to somebody. We should confess our faults one to another.
Yes.
Going this alone is very, very difficult. We need to bring somebody else in on it. I think maybe for your generation, it's less of an embarrassment. For my generation, if somebody's on internet pornography, it's much more of an embarrassment and something that they don't want to admit. But the ramifications and the fallout, once it comes to light, it's just too great. I'll say this, Andrew, while I'm talking. I have seen firsthand, I've dealt with I'll say a few different couples where internet pornography has come to light, where the man is doing it. And I want to tell you what, men, you do not understand, if you have not lived through it, what this will do to your wife if you are viewing internet pornography. It destroys her. And the ramifications don't just last for 10 minutes. They can go on for weeks, months, and years. And it's something you can't undo. I mean, based on my experience in dealing with these different couples that I have dealt with, it's very akin, if not equal, to having an adulterous relationship. It impacts the spouse in very much the same way. If you do not realize that, then realize it now on what I'm saying and take appropriate action to get rid of it today. Today is the day of salvation, not next week. Do something today to get rid of it. Call a friend and say, look, man, I know this is embarrassing. I know this is a problem, but I really need some help. I'm doing this, and I need an accountability partner. I need to confess. You don't have to go advertise it to the world. You don't have to get on social media and post it that I've got this trouble. But everybody should have a friend or a pastor or somebody they can go to. For goodness sake, if you have to, call a counselor. Go make a private appointment, but do something to admit that you have a problem, because that's the first step to resolving it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're 50 years old and you've been looking at pornography for 30 years and you've never told anyone, and, God forbid you're a religious leader or something, at that point, telling the truth is an act of faith. You cannot convince yourself that your life is going to be better. But you have to believe in the spirit of the truth. And you have to believe in the goodness of God, who is himself the spirit of truth. And you have to say, I am taking it on faith that being honest about this is going to render a better reality. Is it going to be terrible in the short term? Yes. Yes, it is. And you know what? Whatever you've done with pornography, it will stay with you for the rest of your life. Even if you completely reform, and praise the Lord for that, those scars will always be there. Stop the bleeding now. Stop adding to it. Look, we have a lot of sexual deviance in this culture. We have a lot of
That's a mouthful.
Sexual abuse in this culture. I'm going to come at this from two angles. Okay, first of all, it is considered sexual abuse to do a sex act in front of a child. Okay?
Yes.
Rightly so.
Absolutely.
Children are getting access to pornography via the internet extremely young. Like way younger than you would need to be able to process something like that.
Oh, yeah.
What that means is my generation is basically a generation of sexually abused people. We are so sexually broken, and a lot of it can be blamed on this. Okay? Also, we know someone who was in church leadership and was found doing, I don't even want to say what they were doing, but doing heinous things, right? And it came out, and the name of Christ was brought reproach upon, and all of that. Just awful. We've all seen that movie. Okay, it's terrible. It starts with pornography, right? No one gets up one day and just takes a video camera and puts it in a bathroom. It starts with pornography. All of this pedophilia that we have going around, it starts with pornography, right? And look, even if you're like, okay, it's mild. It's not like that. It's not all that deep, dark, deviant stuff. Okay, first of all, it can turn into that. But second of all, my generation, what I fear for them is that their sexual identities are being shaped by pornography, so that when they are finally in a committed, even marital relationship, the sex that they have with their spouse, the sex is the replacement for the pornography, not the pornography the replacement for the sex. And what that means is we have completely missed the beauty and the glory of God's design, the relational closeness, the deep emotional intimacy that comes with sex, because we've been so warped by pornography.
Yeah, I've never thought about the fact that your whole generation, more or less, has been sexually abused. But I think that's a insightful way to look at it. And I think if we deal with it in those terms, things make a lot more sense. Everything from the trans movement, to a lot of other things, it all makes sense in view of that. If you think about it in those terms and what happens in the mind relative to that. And so, one other point I guess I will make here is that parents, you have got to control what your kids are doing. Is it going to be counter-cultural? Are they going to rebel against you? Yes, but do not let them drive off that cliff. If your 15-year-old is taking their phone into their bedroom at night and you don't know where they're going and there are no controls, then you're setting themselves up for failure. A 15-year-old doesn't have, in most cases, the cognitive insight and willpower to avoid going down that rabbit hole.
The spiritual maturity.
Yeah, the spiritual maturity. And so, we as parents are given the responsibility to protect our children from being sexually abused. So are we doing it? Are we taking that seriously? From a parenting standpoint, I was never one that said, okay, I'm going to put a fence up and my kids are never going to cross that fence. And then when they get 18, I'm going to open the gate and let them go. That's not how we parented. I don't think that's healthy. I think you have to dole out that responsibility at age-appropriate times and mental and spiritual prepared times to deal with those things. Because ultimately, when they go off to college, then they are going to be exposed to those things. So if we haven't exposed them to it and then we turn them loose, that's no good. But what we have to do is we have to equip them to deal with it, which means being open and honest about the things and going into it with that mindset to train them how to respond. We have to talk about these things. And so when it comes to internet pornography, parents, stop doing it yourself. If you are, get help. But for goodness sake, protect your children from these things.
Yes. You want your kids to look at pornography? If you look at it yourself, you're dooming them to that. I've been in Genesis in my devotions. And the way that the sins of the father are repeated by the son is so clear. You look at Abraham and Abimelech. What happens when he lies about Sarah not being his wife, but being his sister, and almost destroys Abimelech's household? It's like the exact same story, same characters and all, except for Isaac and Rebekah. He does the same thing his dad did, right? Abraham deceives Abimelech. Isaac deceives Abimelech. Jacob deceives Isaac. Jacob is then deceived by his own sons, right? All of the sons follow in the sins of the father, right? Don't think that your kids are somehow not going to fall into the traps that you have fallen into. You have got to dig your way out by the grace and by the power of God if you want to spare them from that. Amen.
Yeah, so I think we've covered that pretty well. And we've been going for a while. We probably need to kind of tie a bow on things. We've said a lot today about social media, internet pornography. We just want people to stop. Back to what I said earlier. I'm repeating myself, but I think it bears repeating. Evaluate your purpose in life. Be intentional and honestly evaluate whether these things are moving you toward God or moving you away from God. Are they fulfilling the purpose God intends for you, or are they hindering you from fulfilling that purpose? That's what we're really asking people to do, and hopefully we've given them some things to think about relative to these issues.
Yeah. Don't think that you have to do it because everyone else is doing it.
Amen.
Right? Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. It's okay to get out of that gravitational orbit, right? Now, it's not okay to go out of the world, right? Because there is darkness. We need to shine the light. We have to go where the people are to shine the light to them. And a lot of times that's going to mean using the contemporary technologies, right? As you do so, keep a close guard over your heart, over your spirit, and over your behavior, and be wise as to how you use these technologies and the principles that you need to orient your technology use around.
Amen.
All right. Well, I think that's enough for today. Don't forget to send us your feedback for a chance to be given The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. God bless you.